Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we're doing something a little meta. We're undertaking a deep dive into the very hardware of our own minds.
Right. We're using the tools of neuroscience to analyze the primary tool we use to understand everything else, our own brain.
And that means asking a core and, frankly, pretty uncomfortable question.
Which is, why is it so difficult for us to think rationally? How does this incredible machine, our brain, which evolved for survival in a far simpler, more dangerous, but ultimately less complex environment, how does it so often betray us in the modern world?
It's a question that's taken on this profound urgency. We live in an era of unprecedented information access.
A fire hose of information.
Exactly. And that has unfortunately coincided with an explosion of misinformation and, well, high-stakes polarization. The individual ability to critically assess data isn't an academic luxury anymore.
No, it's survival gear. For your daily life and really for society itself. Absolutely. And our mission today is explicitly a systems-level analysis. We're using the lens of neuroscience to focus on the universal human cognitive architecture and its inherent vulnerabilities.
So we're looking at the mechanisms, the incentives, the feedback loops that produce these outcomes, whether it's successful marketing or the spread of a total hoax.
Right. We are not spending time assigning individual blame for being wrong. We're exploring the universal flaws that make all of us, fundamentally, susceptible to manipulation if we don't understand the machinery we're working with.
Our source for this deep dive is Albert Rutherford's 2019 book, Neuroscience and Critical Thinking.
And the subtitle of the book really captures its ambition. It promises to help readers understand hidden pathways of thought, improve memory, make rational decisions, tune down emotional reactions, and set realistic expectations.
That's a tall order.
A very tall order, but it speaks directly to the need we have today, doesn't it?
It does. Rutherford wrote this in direct response to that problem you just mentioned. Information overload. The internet provides vast, unmediated information, a lot of it inaccurate, some of it deliberately malicious.
So his goal was to give people tools.
Concrete neurological strategies to sift through this constant noise and transform themselves into independent thinkers.
I find that approach so fascinating because it suggests critical thinking isn't about innate intelligence, it's about discipline and strategy.
That's his central thesis, really, that critical thinking is fundamentally a set of strategies, a specific process of intellectual self-examination or metacognition.
Thinking about thinking.
Exactly. A process used to intentionally guide decision-making away from our emotional or biased instincts and toward a rational consideration of actions and beliefs.
So to boil it down, it's less about what we know.
And far more about developing an acute awareness of how we know it. It's a process, something that has to be learned, practiced, and integrated until it becomes a habit.
So let's start there. The book says critical thinking begins with metacognition, thinking about your own thought process. It sounds like academic jargon, but it's really just self-awareness of your own mental shortcuts.
Right. And Rutherford is adamant this is not an innate skill. You have to consciously train yourself to do it.
And that training, it focuses heavily on logic and process.
It does. It involves understanding the logic that underlies ideas, deconstructing arguments, and, maybe most importantly, being able to formulate sound arguments yourself. It's like an intellectual martial art.
Yeah. The book notes that even the most brilliant people tackling the biggest global problems, designing sustainable energy systems, negotiating disarmament, they don't rely on raw intellect alone.
No, they start by breaking down the core questions using these very disciplined thought patterns specifically to avoid self-deception.
And a huge and often painful part of that discipline is self-correction. You have to recognize that your brain's default settings are, they're frequently faulty.
It requires constantly questioning your prior assumptions, recognizing the inherent unreliability of your own memory, which we'll definitely get into later, and doubting those gut feelings that feel so reliable in the moment.
This whole discipline leads us to adopt what Rutherford calls scientific skepticism.
And it's so important to stress, this is not cynicism. It's not just being negative about everything.
Right.
It means intelligently doubting and examining your own thought process using objective evidence. You are relentlessly seeking the truth, regardless of what you want the truth to be.
Which is the definition of wishful thinking.
Exactly. And the moment wishful thinking enters the equation, the brain automatically switches modes. It starts engaging in confirmation bias.
It stops being an objective judge.
And transforms into a defense attorney, primarily interested in finding evidence that supports its existing views, rather than deriving a conclusion from the total body of evidence presented.
This is where the systems analysis really begins, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because we see exactly why this happens when we look at the brain's neurological architecture.
This is where it gets truly foundational. We have to look at the evolutionary roots of our cognitive bias, which is often explained through Paul MacLean's triune brain model.
The 3 brains in one idea.
Sort of. The model suggests the brain operates on 3 neurological levels, each corresponding to a different evolutionary stage.
Okay, so we start with the oldest layer, the reptilian brain. This is housed in the basal ganglia.
This is your non-negotiable survival center. It governs the 4 Fs: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction.
The basics.
The absolute basics. It's responsible for that instant fight, flight, freeze response. But for critical thinking, its most relevant function is its instant, automatic, suspicious reaction to anything unfamiliar.
Versus the comfortable relaxation around the familiar.
Precisely. It is the core neurological source of those gut instincts that tell you who to trust in a split second.
And what's fascinating is that external systems, like advertisers, are masters at exploiting this. They don't appeal to your rational need for a product.
No, not at all. They just remind you of familiar things. A nostalgic jingle, a comfortable family scenario, to make you feel safe and form an emotional, pre-rational connection with their product.
They bypass the high-level brain entirely.
Moving up, the next layer is the limbic system, sometimes called the primate brain. This is what controls our emotions.
And emotions evolved as tools, right? As rapid response tools for quick survival decisions.
Exactly. Think of revulsion. You smell rotten meat or some pungent chemical, and you instinctively know not to eat it. That immediate emotional revulsion is far quicker and more effective for survival than stopping to logically reason out the exact toxicity level.
So the limbic system is your brain's keyboard shortcut.
That's a great way to put it. It provides a rough, immediate answer, long before your neocortex can open up the full spreadsheet.
Which brings us to the newest and highest layer, the neocortex, the human brain. This is the sophisticated software. It's responsible for complex planning, long-term strategy, higher-level decision-making.
It's where self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy happens.
Okay, so the conflict is stark. The older, faster subconscious parts, the reptilian and limbic brains, are always ready to override the newer, slower, rational neocortex.
And when the threat is immediate, a predator jumping out of the bushes, that's great, that's what it's for.
But it is the modern world.
In the modern world where the dangers are abstract, financial scams, targeted misinformation, complex political policies, this evolutionary wiring frequently clouds our judgment, forcing us toward fast, simple answers that are often dead wrong.
This clash between the fast, primitive brain and the slow, rational brain, it manifests in several deep psychological needs that drive flawed thinking. We're not just irrational for no reason. We are satisfying basic neurological requirements.
Right. The first one is the deep craving for control and meaning. We are neurologically averse to randomness and chaos. This is why people develop superstitions.
I have to wear my lucky socks for the presentation.
Exactly. Or applying false logic to random events, rationalizing things by saying, oh, it all happened for a reason. It's an internal effort to impose order on a chaotic world.
That need for an illusion of control is so profoundly comforting. Another drive the book points to is simplification.
Complex issues are exhausting. They're overwhelming to the brain. So our brain craves simple, binary explanations. But this simplification impedes critical assessment.
We see this everywhere in tribalism, whether it's political parties or sports teams.
Absolutely. Differences are reduced to easily digestible black and white terms. Our side is good, their side is bad. This fast-tracking bypasses the complex, nuanced reality.
Then there's the deeply social need for self-esteem and group belonging. We are wired to belong to the tribe.
Which means we employ defense mechanisms. We seek external reasons for our own mistakes, blaming traffic when we were late instead of just admitting we had poor planning.
That protects our self-esteem.
Right. And we also conform to group opinions, peer pressure, to maintain our standing in the group, which absolutely obstructs objective evaluation.
And if those needs aren't met, or if we hold two conflicting beliefs at the same time, we experience cognitive dissonance.
And the discomfort that causes is powerful. The brain's response is not usually to seek the objective truth. It's to rationalize away the evidence that causes the conflict.
Like if you buy a very expensive car and it immediately breaks down.
You might rationalize that purchase by focusing only on how great the leather smells. That process reinforces your self-esteem. I made a good choice, rather than promoting objective truth-seeking.
So if the brain is this unreliable, emotionally and instinctively, what does that mean for the fundamental tools we use to perceive reality? Our memory and our perception.
Rutherford goes deep on this, describing the illusion of memory and perception.
And the crucial starting point is that memory is emphatically not a video recorder.
That's the core realization. Memory is a construct. The brain doesn't just replay a file. It rebuilds a reality based on its current needs, your pre-existing beliefs, and all your biases.
So it shapes the memory into a version of reality that is, what, comfortable for the brain to accept.
Exactly. Something it can integrate into your existing narrative of who you are and how the world works.
Even our physical limits contribute to this filtering. Our short-term memory is tiny. It holds only about 7 items for, up to a minute.
But Rutherford argues this small capacity is actually an evolutionary advantage. It forces us to focus instantly on the vital information, the threat, the food, the immediate task, rather than being distracted by a massive data stream.
Okay, what about long-term memory?
Long-term memory is a physical change in the brain. It involves the permanent rewiring of neurons through a process called long-term potentiation, or LTP.
So it's not just data, it's hardware.
It's hardware. And the key takeaway here is that new information only becomes permanently physically wired into the brain if it's associated with meaning, emotion, or existing knowledge.
That's why just memorizing random facts for a test doesn't work.
Right. If you study something boring and unconnected, the neural connections just weaken over time. That's why association and emotional connection are necessary for the physical rewiring. They help the brain decide what is important enough to commit to the costly, permanent storage process.
And the errors in this construction process are staggering. Take flashbulb memories, those incredibly vivid emotional memories, like where you were during a major event like 9/11.
They feel completely real. They grant the person exceptionally high confidence in the memory.
But not accuracy.
Not necessarily. The famous Nicer and Harsh study on the Challenger space shuttle explosion in 1986 proved it. It showed that confidence did not correlate with high accuracy.
So people were sure they remembered it perfectly, but they were wrong.
Very wrong. Details degraded significantly over a relatively short period, yet their confidence remained sky high.
Wow. And then there's source amnesia.
This is a huge one, forgetting where you learned a fact.
Right.
In a hunter-gatherer environment, knowing that berry is poisonous is way more important than remembering who told you.
But in the age of digital media, that is a massive
A
vulnerability.
huge one. We detach a fact from its original, possibly unreliable source, and then we treat the fact itself as gospel.
And this feeds directly into the illusory truth effect.
This psychological mechanism is the engine of rumor and viral misinformation. Simple repetition and familiarity make a statement seem more truthful.
Regardless of whether we were previously told it was debunked.
Yes, the feeling of familiarity from hearing it repeatedly is a stronger signal to the brain than our memory of its truthfulness.
So not only is our memory flawed, but our perception of the immediate world is too.
Inherently flawed. The brain constantly filters, predicts, and interprets sensory data, creating an illusion of reality that is often manufactured.
The classic demonstration is the selective attention test, the invisible gorilla experiment.
Right. When subjects focused intensely on counting basketball passes, a significant number of them totally missed a person in a full gorilla suit walking right across the frame.
When you focus hard on one thing, your brain literally filters out other significant, obvious details to save energy and cognitive load. It's not that you saw it and forgot, you literally did not see it.
And the brain tries desperately to synthesize conflicting sensory data, like in the McGurk effect.
That's the one where what you see overrides what you hear.
Exactly. When you play the audio of one syllable, say "ba," over a video of someone's lip movements making a different syllable, like "ga," the listener perceives a third completely manufactured sound, "da."
So the brain refuses to accept conflicting inputs.
And it just invents a new reality that resolves the conflict.
So seeing is fundamentally not believing. And that profound skepticism about our own senses brings us to the most shocking neurological reality about how we make decisions.
We pride ourselves on consciousness and rationality, but the neurological evidence suggests that the captain of the ship, the neocortex, often receives news of a decision only after the crew has already executed the order.
This is neurological predetermination.
Yes. The famous 2008 fMRI study showed that decision-making signals, specifically observable in the frontopolar cortex, which handles strategic planning, could be observed up to 10 seconds before the subject consciously realized they had made a choice.
10 seconds. That's an eternity in brain time.
A complete eternity. It suggests that the conscious thought, "I choose X," is often just the neocortex drafting a press release to rationalize a choice the primitive brain already made.
It's the neurological basis for justifying behaviors, whether it's an impulse buy or seeking revenge, long after the subconscious impulse has already driven the action.
In this framework, intuition gets stripped of its magical quality. It's not a sixth sense. It's simply the result of extremely rapid subconscious processing of complex nonverbal cues and emotional responses,
It provides an answer.
or at least an immediate course of action before the slower conscious brain can even articulate the logic.
And the physical effort required for rationality is key here.
Absolutely. The frontal lobe, which governs these complex, critical decisions, uses a ton of energy. Therefore, the brain naturally resorts to low-energy instincts, habits, and desires whenever it possibly can.
And this high energy cost, coupled with our bias toward comfort and simplicity, leads us directly into the final core insight: logical fallacies. This is the point where formal rational thought collapses.
And the brain switches into a full-on rationalization engine.
This is the distinction between reasoning and rationalizing.
A crucial one. Critical thinking demands reasoning gathering objective evidence to form a conclusion. But what we often default to is rationalizing, forming a conclusion first, driven by emotion or confirmation bias, and then manufacturing the evidence to justify it.
And successfully justifying a preformed belief gives you a reward.
A powerful, addictive dopamine hit for being correct, regardless of the actual truth.
To counter this, Rutherford stresses the need to understand basic argument structure. Arguments are built on premises, facts, or assumptions to derive a conclusion.
Right, an argument is valid if the logic is sound. But it is only sound if the premises are true and the logic is valid. Flawed arguments or fallacies rely on one or both of those conditions failing.
So let's delve into the specific mechanisms of error, the key fallacies the book highlights, starting with maybe the most pervasive one in modern media: post hoc ergo propter hoc.
After this, therefore, because of this. This is confusing a temporal sequence for causation. Just because event X happened after event Y, we assume Y caused X.
And this fallacy is incredibly appealing because our brain craves causal meaning in observed events. It hates coincidence.
Rutherford uses a specific example cited by Andrew Schlafly about Romania. The claim was that because abortion was illegal for 2 decades, the country supposedly enjoyed low breast cancer rates compared to the West. The conclusion drawn was that abortion causes cancer.
But that logic it's just completely unsound.
It's a textbook post hoc fallacy. It ignores countless confounding variables: smoking rates, diet, access to screening, genetics, the environment. It's an error born purely from the desire to find a simple, satisfying causal link between 2 completely unrelated societal observations.
We see this constantly with simple health claims. I drank green juice and then I got a promotion, therefore green juice causes career success.
The brain defaults to the simplest narrative path. Next up is ad hoc reasoning. This is the mechanism by which closed belief systems protect themselves.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means adding erroneous or invented explanations to a theory after contrary evidence is found, specifically to defend the original conclusion.
The classic example is the ESP believer. They claim that the scientific skepticism of the controlled experiment is what prevents their psychic powers from working.
Exactly. They invented that explanation only after the scientifically controlled studies failed to prove ESP exists. They adjust the rules of reality, introducing a new, untestable variable to protect the sanctity of their initial flawed belief.
This is how sophisticated conspiracy theories function, isn't it? When evidence clearly contradicts the theory.
They don't concede. They invent an ad hoc explanation. The government cleaned up the alien crash site in seconds using cloaking technology. Or the deep state planted that contradictory evidence. It makes the theory immune to correction.
Then there's the argument from final consequence, or teleological thinking.
This is determining causes based on desired effects. Or, more commonly, rejecting a conclusion because you dislike its implications.
A historical example is creationists rejecting evolution because they dislike the implied moral consequences if humanity is just an accidental biological process, rather than a divinely appointed one.
A more modern example often comes up in policy debates. rejecting climate science, not because the data is flawed, but because the desired final consequence is preserving economic stability or avoiding lifestyle changes. The unpleasant scientific conclusion is just undesirable.
We also have argumentum ad ignorantium.
Right. Claiming something is true because there is no proof it is false, using a lack of evidence as evidence.
We haven't found the missing link between apes and humans, therefore, intelligent design must fill that gap.
Or, the unidentified flying object must be alien technology because no known human actor has claimed responsibility for it. It's the ultimate intellectual shortcut, filling a knowledge gap with an assumed, often sensational, conclusion.
And finally, the false dichotomy. This reduces a whole spectrum of possible answers to only two polarized choices, forcing you into an unnecessarily binary decision.
The classic example is nature versus nurture.
When the reality, as fields like epigenetics show, is that the answer is almost always a complex, multi-factor combination. It's not an either-or scenario.
But politicians and marketers thrive on false dichotomies. You are either with us or against us. Buy this product or suffer the consequences. They appeal directly to our deep-seated need for simplicity and certainty, bypassing the complex analysis the neocortex demands.
Okay, so if we accept that our brains are inherently flawed and frequently default to these fallacies, the next logical step is to map the system. How do external actors and institutions exploit these precise inherent flaws to shape perception, power, and ultimately outcomes?
This is the core of the analysis. We have two main actors involved. First, there's the individual brain, which we've established is prone to confirmation bias, wishful thinking, illusory truth effects, and relying on primitive instincts.
But importantly, it is trainable.
Yes. And the second actor is the external systems media, marketing, governance, which are institutions aiming to control a narrative, influence behavior, or generate profit by intentionally bypassing the neocortex's rational checks.
And the incentives driving behavior reveal the system's architecture.
Yeah.
For external systems, the incentives are overwhelmingly focused on profit and engagement.
Marketing exploits neurological limits like the left digit effect. We perceive $19.99 as significantly cheaper than $20 because our brain defaults to the simplest, leftmost information. It's a trick that taps into that need for simplification.
And the success rate of this manipulation is terrifying. The book cites that up to 80% of luxury items and 60% of food purchases are impulse buys.
Which proves that a huge percentage of our purchasing decisions are made in that 10-second window of subconscious decision-making, not through rational consideration of utility or budgeting.
For media and political actors, the incentive is engagement and power.
They benefit profoundly from emotionally charged, simple narratives that reinforce in-group identity. This triggers the reptilian brain's familiar versus unfamiliar response, creating instant loyalty and antagonism toward outsiders.
It's much cheaper and easier to provoke a fight-or-flight response than to engage in a nuanced policy discussion.
And for self-perpetuating systems like multi-level marketing schemes or MLMs, the incentive is purely self-perpetuation. They rely on emotional manipulation, the promise of being your own boss, and heavy group loyalty to incentivize existing members to recruit new ones.
All regardless of the system's inherently unsustainable mathematics. They exploit the need for belonging and self-esteem.
And on the internal side, the individual's incentives are purely primal. Dopamine and comfort. Rationalizing a flaw, making an impulse purchase, or having your existing bias confirmed provides an immediate reward hit.
More profoundly, adopting a simple, closed explanation, like a conspiracy theory, fulfills that deep psychological need for control and meaning in a chaotic world.
A need that is far stronger than the need for objective truth.
This brings us to the core narratives or assumptions shaping decisions that these external systems exploit. The fundamental exploited assumption is that simple belief that seeing is believing, that our memory is reliable, and that our decisions are conscious and rational.
The entire system is built upon you, the listener or consumer, believing that you're a more critical thinker than you neurologically are.
And the external systems then deploy narratives that exploit this assumed rationality. Manufactured fear is a prime example. Security camera ads run even when local crime rates are low.
They invent a problem, the slim chance of a home invasion, and then offer a clear, purchasable solution. They bypass rational threat assessment entirely and tap directly into the reptilian brain's need for safety.
We also see the narrative of simplicity and certainty. This is why conspiracy theories are so magnetic. They offer closed belief systems that promise absolute truth, explaining massive complexity through simple means, like blaming the conspirators.
Which is far more comforting to the brain than accepting that bad things often happen randomly or due to complex, uncontrollable systems.
And, of course, the false authority narrative, relying on charisma or a title or position, the argument from authority fallacy, rather than objective evidence.
We see this in everything, from cult leaders to certain anti-science claims, where the perceived authority of the speaker is used to validate a premise, ignoring the complete lack of objective backing. The promise of certainty offered by the authority figure is preferred over the uncertainty inherent in real science.
The mechanism that makes this whole system so powerful and persistent is the feedback loop that reinforces these outcomes, even when the outcomes are demonstrably harmful, financially, politically, or personally.
It starts with the internal loop, confirmation bias. The brain seeks evidence supporting its conclusions, ignoring or twisting contradictory data. Once a belief is adopted, the brain works to protect it with high energy efficiency.
Then the external reinforcement loop kicks in. Media and social platforms curate information, often driven by algorithms designed for maximum engagement, that confirms that internal bias, which then strengthens your belief system.
The book mentions the viral anti-Muslim hoax emails. Those spread because they confirmed pre-existing Islamophobic or right-wing narratives. People didn't check the facts because the story felt right. It confirmed their existing worldview.
And this leads to system persistence. When the outcome of poor thinking is negative financial loss in an MLM, spreading harmful hoaxes, political gridlock, the individual brain doesn't often admit error.
Because that would trigger massive cognitive dissonance and damage self-esteem.
So instead, it resorts to more rationalization or shifting the burden of proof, moving the goalpost, ad hoc reasoning to protect its belief structure.
And the system of flawed thinking becomes self-insulating. It becomes immune to correction.
So how does this neuroscientific reality manifest in our lives right now? Let's talk about the critical challenge of digital information, where critical thinking has basically become the essential form of self-defense.
The democratization of information means we all have to become our own rigorous editors. This demands stringent verification procedures, checking multiple, independent, non-emotional, fact-checked sources.
And if you're dealing with a controversial topic like climate change policy or health claims,
Rutherford advises researching the source of funding. Are the dissenting reports coming from objective university research or from think tanks primarily funded by vested interests? Accounting for that bias is the difference between critical thinking and just absorbing propaganda.
this heightened awareness applies directly to fighting online scams and hoaxes. We need to be conscious of how scams like the infamous Nigerian 419 scam rely entirely on greed, desperation, and a lack of skepticism.
They target the reptilian brain's drive for immediate reward, promising vast wealth that bypasses any rational long-term scrutiny.
And even seemingly simple misinformation works because it utilizes that illusory truth effect and source amnesia. If an emotionally charged story confirms a pre-existing bias, the brain fails to verify the source.
That anti-Muslim wedding hoax email was effective not because it was true, but because it utilized manufactured moral outrage to override the reader's capacity for critical doubt.
There's a wonderful anecdote from the book illustrating the power of simple scientific analysis countering widespread misinformation. The debunked burger myth.
Oh, right. The urban legend that claimed fast food hamburgers wouldn't rot because they were loaded with chemicals and preservatives.
Exactly. And the narrative was simple and appealing. Big corporations are poisoning us.
But a journalist actually tested this scientifically, side by side with homemade burgers, and the result. The preservation wasn't due to exotic chemicals, but simple, understandable biology, dryness.
Any properly cooked burger that loses its moisture quickly will not mold, because mold requires moisture to grow. It's thousands of years of meat preservation knowledge.
But the brain prefers the sensational narrative of corporate chemical corruption over simple physics.
Turning to institutional vulnerability, the justice system is a clear example of how dependent we are on inherently flawed human input. Memory contamination has huge implications for law enforcement and court testimony.
A person's constructed reality is presented as fact.
The FBI, understanding the mechanisms of memory construction, actively discourages leading questions or coaching witnesses.
Because they can unintentionally cause confirmation bias in the testimony itself. If an agent hints at a suspect's appearance, the witness's constructed memory may subconsciously conform to that hypothesis even if the suspect wasn't the perpetrator.
Since memory is biased toward protecting one's own narrative, professionals, police, therapists must use slow, open-ended questioning to achieve more accurate accounts.
It's an institutional recognition that a witness's high confidence is often completely irrelevant to the actual accuracy of their recollection.
And in the realm of power and perception, marketing strategies are entire systems built explicitly to exploit the brain chemistry and biases we've discussed.
Beyond the left digit effect and impulse buys, they strategically exploit our need for consistency.
This is the consistency bias. It's related to our drive for self-esteem and belonging. Salespeople use leading questions to get a customer to verbally agree they like a product. You said you like the features, right?
And once the customer agrees, they feel compelled to appear consistent to themselves and the salesperson by purchasing it, regardless of genuine need or value.
And the manufacturing of fear is just relentless. High-end security system ads often run during true crime programming.
They're manufacturing a problem, convincing low-risk individuals that they are high risk, and then offering a clear, purchasable solution. They hijack the reptilian brain's safety imperative to bypass any rational threat assessment.
Finally, let's connect this back to governance through the psychology of conspiracy thinking.
Conspiracy theories are the purest form of cognitive flaw weaponized against chaos. They proliferate where knowledge is lacking or traumatic events occur, like a global pandemic or a political assassination, precisely because they fulfill that deep need for meaning and control.
And this thinking is often defined as a closed belief system.
Yes. It relies heavily on confirmation bias and the fundamental attribution error, which attributes all actions to internal, planned, intentional motives, ignoring coincidence, accident, or systemic failure.
And this closed system is entirely insulated by constantly shifting the goalposts and the burden of proof.
But here is the critical double-edged sword. The very existence of real past conspiracies provides potent fuel for both healthy skepticism and dangerous delusion.
Right. We can't just dismiss all paranoia entirely when we have documented atrocious government operations.
We've seen evidence of Project Sunshine, where the U.S. government stole dead children's bodies without consent to test nuclear fallout absorption. We know about the CIA's MKUltra mind control experiments involving non-consenting subjects and illegal drugs.
And we have documented cases of COINTELPRO, where the FBI actually was spying on and attempting to discredit domestic political figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and the Black Panthers.
These true historical conspiracies provide a potent foundation of distrust. They make it incredibly difficult for the average person to separate healthy, critical questioning of institutions from wild, illogical delusion driven by ad hoc reasoning and the need for simple certainty.
The existence of proven bad actors validates the fundamental suspicion, even when the specific theory itself is baseless.
Rutherford's book fundamentally shifts our view of irrationality from a character flaw. That person is stupid or mean to neurological necessity.
A necessity.
Yes. The brain's reliance on instinct due to the frontal lobe's high energy use means that flawed outcomes are inevitable unless conscious, energy-intensive critical thinking systems are intentionally adopted.
And that is the heart of systems analysis, shifting the discussion from who is to blame to what is the mechanism causing the error.
Understanding the why of the error, the evolutionary pressure for speed over accuracy, is far more important than identifying the who to blame for believing a hoax.
This perspective reveals power hidden inside neutral processes, cognitive limits like source amnesia, selective attention, the illusory truth effect. They appear to be neutral functions of our biological hardware.
But they are systematically weaponized by media, marketers, and political actors who understand them deeply.
And that weaponization grants hidden power over perception to those external actors. They don't have to win a rational argument. They just have to exploit the flaws we already possess, turning our own biological shortcuts against us for profit or control.
Finally, we see how moral narratives become embedded in institutions. Our evolved moral code, like the instinctive tendency to avoid someone who committed murder because we feel a primitive sense of contamination, influences our societal systems and laws.
So when institutions or external actors manipulating those institutions rely on simple, emotionally resonant moral narratives instead of rational, evidential debate, they reinforce that primitive, non-critical thinking.
The success of that anti-Muslim hoax email, for example, relied entirely on manufactured moral outrage to bypass the reader's critical capacity, demonstrating that emotion, when weaponized, is often more powerful than logic.
So what this book helps us see differently is the urgent need to view the brain as a complex physical organ subject to chemical processes, extreme limitations, and evolutionary biases, not a perfect, rational engine.
Right. Reality itself is largely a highly filtered and constructed illusion designed for survival, not for absolute objectivity.
And this perspective matters profoundly because it forces intellectual humility. Recognizing the inherent unreliability of our own perception, memory, and default thought processes is the necessary first step toward becoming an effective critical thinker.
And changing these habits, achieving true intellectual independence, requires nothing less than physical and neurological retraining.
It also raises some deeply uncomfortable philosophical questions, doesn't it? If those fMRI studies are accurate, and subconscious signals make decisions up to 10 seconds before we are consciously aware of them, how much true agency do we really possess?
Are we simply complex rationalization machines built atop an automatic primitive base, using our neocortex primarily to tell ourselves a believable story about choices that have already been made?
And if critical thinking requires fighting against these deeply evolved instincts that offer neurological comfort and simple, quick, meaning like the dopamine hit of being correct, or the security of a simple closed belief system,
Then what societal or educational systems can we even design to consistently incentivize the difficult path toward objectivity and intellectual humility? It remains the constant, essential battle between our evolved self and our modern environment.
we highly recommend exploring the insights of Albert Rutherford in his book, Neuroscience and Critical Thinking.
If you found the ideas valuable, please read the book yourself, support the author, or check your local library for free access.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.